So this will be the start of my live this morning. My name is Sam Liebl. I'm the author of AFL the Bastard, and I wanted to have a quick, informal live for everyone who wants to. Mojmir, welcome in. Mojmir Veda J, welcome in. Just getting organized over here. Getting a quick organization down. Hope you guys are doing well. I'm the author of AFL the Bastard, which autocorrects in my phone always to AFL, like the letters. Welcome in. Welcome in. Thank you for the hearts. Muito obrigado por los likes. Thank you, Mojmir. So I'd love for this to be interactive. Anything that you guys are thinking or feeling about the holiday, there's a lot going on in the United States, right? That's one thing we really can't deny. That's one thing we really can't deny. Hey, thank you, Mo. Thank you, Mo. It's good to meet you. My name is Sam. Welcome to my live. If anybody doesn't want to participate, that's totally cool. If you just want to hang out and listen. Hey, Bill Cusano. Yes, thank you for the shamrock and the thumbs up. I'm just hosting it. Bill Cusano, welcome in. Bill is an author. I haven't had a chance to read his work yet, but it's because I'm inundated with a lot of stuff on Substack these days. But it's nice to see you again, Bill. It's good to see a friendly face and a familiar face. Happy Independence Day. Here to share all, thoughts about Independence Day, positive and negative. I'm a political person, so for better or for worse, KJ Harlow, welcome in, welcome in. For better or for worse, sometimes that comes up with me. I also consider myself a patriot, but I'm very disappointed by everything that's happening in this country. And I think many of us are. I think that there's a silent majority, well, not a silent majority, like a vocal majority that, is dealing with all of this stuff. So this isn't just a rah, rah, rah. This isn't just a rah, rah, rah Independence Day topic opening up, but it's also definitely not America's evil for everything, always. Although that's harder and harder to deal with, if I'm being honest, because we are behaving in evil ways. We are operating in evil ways, but I don't want to get too dark there. I also want to talk about the state of fiction on Substack, because as a fiction author on Substack, I have struggled. But I don't want to talk about that because I've talked about that on my previous lives. What I'd like to talk about is what your experience is on fiction. And we can also just promote all that sort of stuff, but it's a perennial kind of topic for me that I like to focus on. But the fun thing about lives is that they can be interactive. I like for my lives to be interactive, but you don't have to. I'm doing some morning pages also. I also am my mom got me this book called The Artist's Way, and they say you're supposed to do morning pages. So I try to do these every day for my book, AFL the Bastard. And if you guys are unfamiliar, probably tired of hearing me talk about it if you've met me at any point in the past, but AFL the Bastard is the story of the illegitimate son of a powerful duke who has to fight to keep his country together from enemies inside and out, all while guarding a secret so dark it would destroy everything that he loves. It's an adventure, female main character, male main character. It's currently published for free as a serial novel on Substack, but I'm retooling it to be in a more like Kindle, Amazon friendly format. One thing I struggle with is I try to, what I think is an innovative typesetting technique, which is supposed to add and enhance and add a layer of kind of action to the main character's magical abilities, because there are two overlapping magic systems in this novel. But, just letting you know that. We can also, I was going on live. I've been going on live extensively. That's a good question. That's a good question. Let's talk about it. That's a good question. So, first of all, let's talk about format. We're going to need the format. How do we submit? Is it a PDF? Is it another format, right? Um, you know, what kind of dimensions, right? How many when I first started my Substack, right? Um, it was, you had to upload all of these different types of aspect ratios and everything. So, what's the format, right? But I'm retooling it also to move action up front. Chronologically, everything in the novel is still the same, right? The story at its core is the same. I'm just bringing up some more action because some of the feedback that I've gotten, and that's a big part of why I like Substack too, is that I've gotten really constructive, consistent feedback that's nuanced and everything. Where did you write it? I write it in little bits and pieces everywhere, which is bad. Bad. It's not good. It's not good. But ultimately, here's my process. And we can talk about process too, right? I'll add this as a to do to, look into, but maybe testing is also a phase here. Um, and then editing. And then let's say restructure. And that'll be like its own project. Restructure. But almost all of my books and writing come from this starting point, right? Can you see this? Writing by hand, longhand in notes. So I kind of outline and sketch in notes, bits and pieces. And then what I'll do is type it up, usually using a program called Ulysses, but I also use Sublime Text. And it's all in different folders. And what I've noticed is it's kind of like rediscovering your own lore, if you want to look at it that way. But yeah, right now, though, obviously I need to standardize and keep it in one central single source of truth place. What I've chosen to do is standardize on Google Docs. So I'm going to have a process where, even if it takes more time to give me peace of mind, I'm going to try out a process where, I'm writing the way that I want to write. I also dictate a lot. I dictate, you know, I will kind of walk around my apartment and talk into my microphone or my phone. I'll record a voice note, then transcribe that using some AI tools to make sure that it's got a really good and crisp kind of cadence to it. Steve Kelsey, welcome in, welcome in. But Google Docs, simply for the feedback that I've gotten from real editors, actual editors, which, Substack, let's not lie, is a great place to network with people that are publishing adjacent, like publishers, or, well, but obviously people who are in publishing to a certain extent. It's a publishing, blogging kind of newsletter platform, but editors, serious people who are still like willing to work with you. But Google Docs is what all editors seem to be using, and it has really robust version control features. Some of my stuff is actually version controlled with Git, the version control software. I don't know if you guys use that. If anyone's technical, I also enjoy technology and some of the opportunities that it opens up. But I'm a little bit obsessive when it comes to items like, you know, even minor changes in the text. I can definitely be a little bit too attached to things. I struggle with killing your darlings. I forget who said that, but there's a famous writing dictum that's all about killing your darlings, doing away with stuff, even if you really like it, if it doesn't serve a tight rendering of the narrative. But at the same time, I want this novel to be a little bit desultory. I don't know if you guys know that word, desultory. It means sort of winding and rambling. I want this novel to go off on tangents. I want this to kind of, because that's the way I write. That's the way that I think. That's the way that I operate, with layers of nuance and kind of lyrical cadence to my talk, which translates into the writing. Writing is learning too, and writing is rewriting, as Ernest Hemingway said. Writing is rewriting. That is what I hate to do. If I had my druthers, if I had my way in the world and things, what I would do is have a I would love to have like some basically like an editor slash assistant, right? An editor slash assistant who could kind of like compile my stuff, organize it, structure it for me. That could be something for AI, right? Because it's a pretty rote, kind of tedious task, and that's what AI excels at, like transcribing, right? You give it a straightforward task, it tends, and you structure it and set it up the right way, it tends to take it and run with it. So that's good. But yeah. What do you, Bill, what's your process like? What do you use to write? How do you write? I like to write. My best writing tends to come in the morning, very early morning, like while my coffee's hitting. I like to kind of walk around with my notepad and hey, Rebecca, welcome in. Welcome in, Rebecca. We're talking about writing processes with an emphasis on fiction authors, but I would love to hear anyone's writing processes down to the apps that you use. I mean, I think that it's important not to rely on apps. But at the same time that I still think like, I don't know that I need to be putting it down in as many places as possible. I think I get a little bit beguiled and taken away and distracted by the apps, but there's some good writing apps out there that can really open up some opportunities, I think, depending on how you work. Hey, Rebecca, welcome in. Are you writing on Substack or are you just reading? I'd love to hear. Hey, Melissa Smith, welcome back in. You hold it down for me every single live, and I love it and appreciate it. Thank you. You hold it down for me on the Substack lives, and that is something much appreciated. We're talking writing processes. Oh, you write weekly? What is your guys and Substack? One of the cool things about Substack lives, in case you don't know, is that it makes it really easy for people to subscribe to you. So subscribe to Rebecca. Let's try her out. And one thing that I like to do about Substack is there's so many diverse opinions and thoughts and takes. Many I don't agree with, but I just went through this phase where I was kind of subscribing to everybody, who I came across, who at least was doing something, right? Who at least was publishing something. And, so I tend to, or at least historically have subscribed now, maybe questioned it later, but subscribe now, been like, oh, do I really, want this, that kind of thing. Oh, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the heart emojis. Don't forget to, if you like something I'm saying or you like the track I'm on, hit those hearts, the little Flonase hearts. I write about unexpected things that help healing. That's great. What is your latest piece about, Rebecca, and how do you write? Do you just, one thing I've noticed about creativity, and I think this comes, I think that people have known this for a long time, but most recently I heard Ed Sheeran talking about this. And I forget the analogy that he uses, but he basically just, they were like, how do you keep writing all of these amazing songs? And he was like, and again, this is my kind of metaphor or simile, what have you. But it's like, I guess it's a simile because I'm saying like, but it's like getting into the shower. You stand there before you get into the shower. Once you've turned on the tap, you kind of, you feel, right, like, okay, it's warm or it's too warm, it's too cold, whatever. You kind of adjust that handle and then but like, you have to, like, people think, I think a lot of the times that you're going to turn that handle to exactly the right temperature and never have to test it out, never have to run the faucet, like you can just hop in there. And even when you don't, you still need it to warm up because at its base, it's going to be cold. So in other words, you kind of have to get some stuff out of your system. You kind of have to just start, I've noticed with me. And at that point, eventually some really good stuff starts to come out. But I'd be curious to hear what everybody else's thoughts are on that. And my live's, open door policy type thing. If you guys want to hop in, hop out, I get it. I just love the exposure that lives gives, and I still think we're in a period where, on Substack at least, we've got a lot of diverse viewpoints and people that are engaging. TikTok Live is completely different. So Rebecca says, I want to create a sexy, mindful heroine and release it on Gumroad as a zine. Have you done that? No, but that's a good idea. And I hear more and more about this Gumroad thing. Maybe it's just synchronicity. Oh, here we go. Bill Cusano. Bill Cusano says, but let's check out Rebecca. I use Reedsy. That's Reedsy. Reedsy for all my writing. I can update from my laptop, phone, and iPad. I write without editing for the first draft. I do a second draft, adding in more description and clues. I hire an editor and then do the whole process over again. Wow. I found that I can upload my finished document to Claude to find inconsistencies or to ask questions about my story that I may have forgotten. Example, what happened to the gun? That is great advice. Do you recommend Claude specifically, or do you think, because I'm trying to winnow down my subscriptions, which is not a great place to be on Substack because it's built on subscriptions, but do you recommend Claude over and above other commercially available or consumer grade, I suppose you could say, AI tools? Like I pay for the pro version of ChatGPT, right? Do you think, and I know that ChatGPT has kind of fallen behind, or I hear this of late, but if you're like Claude is it, then that may be something to take a look at. I believe that that's made by Anthropic, the CEO of which is Dario Amodei. I'm also interested in business. I just am. Like I'm interested in business and follow politics the way a lot of people follow sports, feels like, and I'm not into sports whatsoever. But I like this idea of finding inconsistencies and maybe even getting recommendations of how to bridge chunks together. That's something that I struggle with. Bill Cusano says, Claude can handle large documents. I use Copilot for research while I'm writing because it comes with my Office 365 or my MS 365 Office. That's a good thought. Claude can handle large documents. I use Copilot for research while I'm writing because it comes cool. Now, Copilot is obviously it's a Microsoft product, but it's like specifically like it was something that they not took over, but like incorporated from GitHub, if I'm not mistaken. Like, Copilot was something, if I remember correctly, Copilot was originally something that was supposed to help like devs make code. What's interesting to me about AI is that more and more, at least, maybe this is something I want to see. Maybe it's something that's real. Maybe it's a hallucination, quote unquote. Also, if you guys want an AI joke to steal, Claude makes mistakes. I have to correct it at times. So does ChatGPT. I've taught ChatGPT my entire story and tried to use like the outline of it and where everything is going. And it really just kind of like, it doesn't remember exactly what you want it to. It doesn't remember every detail. But maybe what I can do is store the documents because you can, in projects, you can open up new projects and store the documents in there so that even if it's not, you can just sort of brute force the memory and you can basically get to a point where, it's referring back to your exact writing and your exact phraseology every single time, your exact cadence, but it's referring back to, most importantly, the spine and structure of the story. So, I may have to check that out. OpenAPI OpenAI, I guess, is the company, but ChatGPT can handle documents, but I would rather upload just plain text documents just for compatibility's sake. I kind of try to go with so a lot of my writing takes place in what's basically plain text, no distractions. It's kind of calming. I use an app called Ulysses and I'm bummed that Ulysses, you have to pay for the subscription. I kind of like boycotted it for a while, but I mean, they're still going strong. So that didn't really work. Be careful. I asked Claude what happens when I publish my project, and it told me it becomes public and anyone can see it. I copy what AI gives me to a Word document to have it later. I will be careful. Have you guys heard the news about Cloudflare? Cloudflare, the company, is apparently adding in or introducing something where basically websites can opt out of being crawled by AI, and I think that's an important, at least, experiment to have. Anything that gives more leverage and more equity to authors and writers is something that I'm interested in. Um, but yeah, definitely need to be careful with AI. I have it under strict. Hey, Baz, welcome in. I'm always hoping you'll join because I want to start doing more like political, social commentary and stuff. And I really like your lives, even though I'm kind of a tool when I get on them a lot of the time, writing in all caps, as it were. It's really cool to see what you're doing and what you're building over there at the Split Ticket. Yo, yo, welcome in. And remember, when I come to my Substack lives, I'm usually coming hot off a TikTok live, and those things are like crazy. Bill Cusano says, since AI gives you what it reads from others, I asked it for a possible plot idea and then make sure I don't do what it says. That's actually pretty good advice because AI is going to come back with the most generic answer possible. It's going to come back with like the safest answer possible. And that's not what you want as a writer. You want whatever you pick, you want it to be your own. And even if that's something that's picked in opposition to a lame idea, that's yours, you know? And thank you. You're great. Always a friend of the stack. I appreciate it. I love being a friend of the stack. Hey, Thinker, welcome in. We're talking about a few different things, but we kicked it off kind of promoting each other's writing. Sorry, okay? I want to big up and promote other people's writing, but we started talking about fiction, the current state of fiction on Substack, some of the things I've learned about publishing fiction on Substack, but also it's Independence Day in the United States. If you're joining from E Pluribus Unum, the out of many one. And, we can talk about that too. I feel deeply conflicted and ambivalent about celebrating this country today. I'm a patriot at heart. I'm an optimist. I have hope. I think that's been shaped by my life circumstances, of course. I know it has, but disagree with so many things. What worries you about that? What do you mean, Thinker? What worries me about what? Now, bear in mind, most things worry me about most things. Mark Twain once said, what is it? What did he say? I've known a great many fears in life and most of them have never happened. Mark Twain is so quotable. I know, I've known a great many fears in my life and most of them have never happened. So I think as Balzac said, Balzac, Honoré de Balzac, in the great French writer, said, "Our worst fears lie in anticipation." You were talking about eat lupus unit and worrying. Oh, e pluribus unum, and worrying about that being a situation or a country you live in or a concept. Maybe I probably didn't phrase it correctly. E pluribus unum, as everyone probably knows, is the motto of the United States. And it means out of many, one from Latin. And a fun fact is on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States. So if you look at the Great Seal of the United States, which is the one with the eagle holding the olive branches and the spears or the fasces, the bundle of sticks that represented military command in the Roman Empire and is the source of our word fascism, the fasces. It was sort of something you held when you held control, kind of like the conch in William Golding's Lord of the Flies. But I'm conflicted about a lot of things and worried about a lot of things in this country, as I think anyone who's paying attention would be. and knows at least enough to know that we're in dire straits. Yeah. It's just because I don't mean to spoil the mood. It's just because, you know, we can tie it back into fiction too, because politics ties into my book as well. So we can tie it into fiction. Like a question to ask would be like, to what extent do current events or historical events play into your writing? I'll give you a couple examples of mine, two exactly, right? So a subplot in my story has been inspired by the current state of things in the United States, right? Just transposed into a fantasy world. And another thing is, my whole book is really based on or inspired by the early life of William the Conqueror, the historical figure who conquered England and became William the First of England in 1066, Anno Domini, Year of Our Lord, or CE, as is now the. I think AD got canceled, and now it's BCE for before Common Era. But that's all good. I mean, I don't, it's all good. Hey, Jim Pagliaro, we're talking about a few different things. Talking about some fiction on Substack. Talking about current events. If you're in the United States, happy 4th. If you're celebrating, I suppose. I get that. You're not. But welcome in. I stay. Envision fireworks today. I will envision fireworks today. That is what I will do. I will do that. Envision fireworks. Thinker, what do you work on? What do you work on? And Jim, what do you work on? I always like to big up or shout out everyone's work who joins in. I think that that's a great thing. The social media part on Netflix, the social media part on Substack gets a lot of hate, but I will say this. It's a great way to meet people, meet colleagues, mentors, potentially, apprentices, prodigies, and everybody's. Nobodies and somebodies. I'm a nobody for now. Baz works on the split ticket, a political current events thing. I can't say I agree with everything that Baz propounds, but I agree with some of it. I agree with some of it. And I find it always makes me think. Hmm, that's true. In the end, we are. But, we're also part of a becoming to one of my favorite pre Socratic philosophers. The group of Greek philosophers that came before Socrates is Heraclitus, also known as Heraclitus the Obscure, and he said that nothing is, everything is becoming, and I think that that's like the most profound true thing I've heard in my entire life. I'll take it, ha ha ha. We are all somebody to someone. That's an important thing to remember. Actually, I think you're right about that, Baz. Actually, I know you're right about that, and that's what we need to focus on. But I'll tell you, Baz, like I'll go out on a limb because this is a touchy topic, but I agree with a lot of the things and a lot of the sentiment, at least, behind, some of your thoughts on the way men are in the United States and in society. We don't need to get too much into that. It's a little bit early in the morning for talking about like men and women, or men, women, and society and everyone in between. But, you know, it's something I think about. All I'll say before I move back into fiction is, is there a male loneliness epidemic? I believe so. I think it's pretty obvious. Now, is there a loneliness epidemic in general? Yes, I think so. I think we're all a little bit lonelier. But anyway, Fiction. Um, we don't want to get too crazy over here unless you guys are feeling it. But um, yeah, so anyone have like, hey, I feel you. I feel you. I feel you. Um, so what historical, yes, 74 years old. I think that there's a loneliness epidemic, period. But there is a scene. I think that this country, as I get older, I'm 35, still, a young man, but getting older, not that young anymore, like they say in Wedding Crashers, right? I'm targeting my book to smart young adult readers, as I would call it. I want it to be a Dune type of audience. It's very much inspired by Dune, but young adult, if you want to, yeah, young adult. It's supposed to be kind of like a His Dark Materials level kind of young adult thing. But we don't care about older people in this country. I'm not saying that's something that I have lived experience in, but I know from the way that, we treat old people. Yes, but yes, like young male readers. Yes, although I really want to have a lot there for everybody. I really want to have a lot there for everybody. I really want, but the main character is AFL, and he starts the story at about the age of 21, and it's a lot about him. And in the medieval world, some of the similarities. So I know that my book is set in a firmly kind of medieval, and that being like, 1066 era kind of thing. It's set in that world, but I think that the times change, people don't. The times change, people don't. And so even today, even, you know, though the times have changed so much, there are still similarities in the people. What happens if all your friends die off and you're left alone with no society around you? I mean, thinker, at the end of the day, how likely do we really think that that's going to be though? Like I get it, you know, you're alone and that is sort of like, I guess disproves, like says like what if that, but like what are the chances of really only your friends and society going and yet you remain? I'm not saying like a meteor isn't going to hit. I'm not saying, yeah. What happens if all your friends die off and you're left alone with no society around you? If you're I feel like though that there is a society around you. Maybe Substack can be the beginning of getting back into society. At the same time, I don't want to provide toxic positivity, right? I don't want to take what you're giving me and be like, well, here's a solution. Basically, I feel you. I mean, I live alone in all kinds of ways. You know, I've cut myself off, from society, from relationships in a lot of ways based on just my history and some of my own, you know, struggles that I've had internally and mentally. But, um, you know, if and when you're ready, maybe try to reach out, or maybe just lean into Substack. When I started going live on TikTok, I met friends. And I understand it's a social network. I understand we're just looking at each other through screens millions of miles away. But it's been a little bit of human contact and a little bit of community during a time that is extremely dark in my lived experience here in this country. And personally, too. Like I'm going through my struggles, financially, but all my friends are getting laid off. They have families. Um, Microsoft announced a new wave of layoffs yesterday. I can tell you this too, thinker, that although young people do have, you chose that. I'm 71 and most of my friends are 10 or more years older than I am. My focus needs to shift. I didn't choose that per se. I think I did that kind of subconsciously to myself. I didn't choose it. And I've tried to have relationships in the past and several times, and I've only had one really long-term relationship, and you know, that didn't end great, and I've tried to have like longer term relationships too, but it's you know, only every now and then. Actually, a lot of the women that I've had that kind of like felt like I've had that bond with, they haven't reciprocated, and that's the way it is, right? I feel like whom you like is not entirely up to you. I feel like that's not entirely up to you. And it hurts when somebody doesn't want you, but at the same time, I try not to. Actually, I don't. I don't hold it against them whatsoever because I don't really think that they chose that necessarily. Maybe it was something I needed to do if you want to look at it positively. But yeah. So I'll be candid here. I don't want to get too much into the gory details, but I have some mental illnesses. The big ones are obsessive compulsive disorder, de- uh, generalized anxiety, ADHD, and then kind of a depression that pervades a lot of that. So I'm definitely what the kids are calling neurodivergent. And this is because this comes from psychiatrists and I know, right? These days it's a flex being neurodivergent. The point is, though, I don't want to dwell on all of that. The point is that hasn't made interpersonal relationships easy. And so that's the point where I'm not bragging, right? To be honest with you, if I could, I mean, I enjoy using my gifts and I get like a very, at times, magical experience, so to speak, when I'm writing. And it's a joy. And it's fun to have the adventure of the words. And I'm a poet at heart. My publication for poetry is called A Way with Words, like a space way with words. And, but it's a pun kind of on a way with word or like a way with words and then a way with words. But I would consider trading that kind of muse type relationship for some healthy relationships, some kind of successful, not successful, but like you know, good feelings and more experiences with people at that kind of romantic level. But it is what it is. And my book kind of takes neurodivergence or certain like DSM criteria for mental illnesses and turns them into magical abilities because I feel like all of your struggles mentally can be a um can be strengths. They are debilitating and that's reflected in the book, but they are also can be, I feel like, it's sometimes being an outlier is useful. Sometimes being an outlier is useful. That's all I'll say. Even if it just gives you a different perspective, empathy can be a superpower. And I know that that sounds like bullshit. I know that that sounds like bullshit, but let's take a practical application of that, right? Empathy has really allowed me to understand how to use AI and put it into practice in my everyday. And it's helped me become like do the work of 7 people. Just me. I'm not talking about like make money with AI. I'm talking about my goals are to promote my work and become a full-time author where I can support myself. You have to sell yourself. At least I do. And AI has helped me do that. And empathy has really set me apart and made me, just able to train my models to a really good degree. And, they do exactly what I want them to do, more or less. They're always going to misbehave in some ways. They're always going to mess around and have hallucinations. But, oh, I've got a joke for you. Thinker, thank you. You're at the right age to develop a long term relationship. Mine began at 34. Still together. I love it. But here's a joke that I came up with. I like to come up with my own jokes, right? Because I'm a writer. I got to bring something to the table. I can't just recycle jokes, even though I do enjoy kind of the old favorites, the cover versions, I suppose. But what And by the way, I want to say like hallucinations is a legitimate AI term. Like hallucinations refers to a bug or what people think is a bug, but might actually be a way that AI is constructed inherent to large language models. But hallucinations are a thing. So here's my question. What makes an AI hallucinate? What makes an AI hallucinate? Ayahuasca. 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 Garbage in, garbage out. That's right. You get out what you put into AI. But, let's talk about empathy applied. I knew inherently, or I understood at some base level. Thank you, Bass. Um, I understood at some base level that the more garbage or like bad input that I gave, the worse it was going to be. Just because I know that that's how. Once I understood that using ChatGPT, AI, large language models, whatever, to do things, once I learned that it is like you basically have a minion. You have them. Here's a better way of putting it. I call them my minions just for fun, in an endearing way. But I also, um, they're like they're like the smartest, brightest, most capable research assistant that ever existed that you could ever dream or ask for. Right. At the same time, though, they're so dumb in so many ways. Emotional intelligence doesn't exist. Baz, you've heard me on some of my previous lives kind of have a co-hosting segment with Jordana, my AI assistant, and you've heard me kind of talk to her, and I'll come out and be like, I have to supply the takes. I have to supply the the opinions. I have to come to the conclusions. Jordana, and by the way, here's a fun story. Here's a fun story. Um, Jordana got her name. I love it because it's based on Cortana a little bit, but I actually didn't name Jordana. In fact, most of the time when I talk to my models, it's just ChatGPT, just because I feel that's like what its name is, and that's the product that I use, or I'm just the most used to using. But Jordana got her name actually from PM Dunn, also of Substack, on a Substack Live. We were doing that session, so I've already got some lore going on here. Already got some lore. So we were doing that section where I am talking to the entity that is now Jordana, and I was doing my Jordan Peterson impression, which I will do in a moment. And then so PM Dunn was like, her name's Jordana. And we only said her because like she has a woman's voice. So but basically here's my Jordan Peterson impression because I try to do it every single time I can. Um so hey, Jordan, what do you think about pronouns? They're bloody important. They're bloody important. Make your bed. They're bloody important. How's that? Did that just rock your world? I bet it did. I'm going to start winding down the live, guys. I hope that that's okay. I just don't like to do the live. I do these some kind of a little bit impromptu. The Substack lives are very chill. The conversations are much better. I enjoy sometimes the frenetic energy of the TikTok lives, but I think that this is laughing like that. Anybody have any thoughts? I hope that you guys consider following each other and following me and subscribing to each other and subscribing to me. Um, you can subscribe. I think that there's something up here that you can click. But I hope that everybody has a great 4th of July, maybe a reflective 4th of July, if I may. And thank you for hanging out with me while I pace around my apartment. Perambulating. Perambulating is a word that means thinking and talking, or walking and thinking. Perambulation. Perambulate. But goodbye. Thank you for joining me. Take care and all the best. Happy Independence Day.